Water has put so much time, so much effort to get us here, and I was hoping for him to say, okay, we're done with it. He said, well, we're done, but we need to make an adjustment when something come up, and we promised to do that. This is our report for this month. Speak of the same project list that you had before with some changes. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick comment on that.
Yes.
What this report allows us is, let's take a quick look at Eastern on the first page. Also note up in the upper right that this report is as of August 20th at 5:31 p.m. So Primavera is a dynamic system, always changing, so that's the point we want to look. And my question, as you were talking earlier about Eastern going up 14 million, because you can see the current budget is 34.5. So my quick question to you, Maggie, was when did the 14 million get approved? Was that the August 23rd? The August 23rd meeting?
Yeah.
Is that correct? The last Wednesday? Or?
Yes.
Or, well, that would be a week. Well, anyway, when was it approved?
The week of the 18th.
So, should the 14 million have appeared on this? It obviously didn't, because it's still at 34 million.
Because we personally, personnel-wise, we have not updated that number that got approved by the board into the system yet. It's work in progress. Probably take a week to show.
So anyway, that's an important point. Next time we see this report, that ought to read 48 million for the budget, because that's what the board approved. That's the budget. And then you can see, obviously, the revised commitment and what we've actually spent to date. The other quick one I draw your attention to is De Anza, because that was brought up. And I think, again, the utility of this report. Look at De Anza High School on the second page. Total of 16 sub-projects. We've got to get used to, I think, in our language to understand and realize that the De Anza project, per se, is made up of a number of major sub-projects. Supposedly, for De Anza, there were 16 of them. You can see that 93, as of August 20th, 93.3 million was actually spent on De Anza. There's still 114 million total commitments, that is, obligations, contracts written for work to be done. And then you can see the budget is 118. So by definition, you can infer that De Anza is clearly not quote-unquote finished.
Right.
So what we got that time when we made the tour was, what was finished was, this school is going to open, this school, the classrooms and everything else. So that particular sub-project, if you will, was finished. But that's a potential usefulness of this report, is that you can clearly see that, well, we haven't spent all the money yet. We obviously haven't, the commitments, the contracts haven't all been completed. So anyway, that's another. And then the last quick thing I want to highlight.
You have an appreciating number on that 16 as to the remainder, but the number of projects remaining should equate to that dollar amount.
That's a good idea. Yeah, it
is 16.
These are the kinds of things that I just emphasize again. This is a summary report. It is not an end-all, be-all.
Yeah, I know.
But it is something we could play with. Is if there's a way, we'll think about it as to how we might be able to. How many of those sub-projects are finished, or ones remaining? Maybe 16/2 or something, and then we could put a note that those 2 yet remaining to be completed or something. So you're right, there are things like that we can, I think, do with this report.
I'd like to people to extend for 30 minutes, even though I don't really want to, but I think that we, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Public comment?
All right, I had one more thing I really need to say here on this KPI report. Look at the total cost revised commitments on the last page, 1266. 1266. Those are the contract obligations that are outstanding. Okay? You all should have hold that number while you now look at the bonds KPI report. It was handed out tonight. Martin apologized for not getting it into the packet, but it's the bonds KPI. If you could just take a quick look at that. As of August 27th, you can see that we've issued $1,037,000,000 bonds issued. See that? It's about the 4th column over. We've issued $1,037,000,000. Go back to the schools KPI. total. We've spent $994. We've got $1,266,000 still outstanding contract-wise. We've actually got a budget of $1,007,000. And somebody might say, whoa, we're above the $1,630,000 that the citizens have approved. Well, that budget is not commitment, number one. We haven't written contracts against it all. And then not included, of course, would be the $163 million of matching funds, which is also shown, is not shown on the latest bond KPI, only because Martin apologizes for using the wrong version. The prior meeting had the matching funds column added in there, if you remember. That's still 163, by the way, 163 million of matching funds. So the point is, we've got $1,037,000,000 that we pulled from the approved measures as of August 27th. We've got 163 million supposedly of matching funds in our hands, and that totals up to 1.2 billion. So even on the commitment total on the schools KPI, we don't have enough money according to these numbers without issuing some more bonds. And we know that we haven't issued, according to the KPI report, we have not issued 592 million. And of course there are issues of constraints of the tax rates and all the other things. So we're not exactly free to, for the school district's not exactly free to go ahead and just issue all 592 million. But that's I think the value of this report as we all start to use it and look at it and on a school-specific thing, etc. I said one last thing, but I meant I had one more last thing. Take a quick look at the following elementary schools: Lake, Olinda, and Shannon. Lake, Olinda, and Shannon. The reason I want you to look at those is on the budget numbers. Lake, $1,500,000. Olinda, $1,400,000. Shannon, $1,600,000. Notice that back under the project types, they're all code number 4, which means yet to be rebuilt. What that means is that these $1 million budgets right here, that's not going to rebuild those schools. It's going to be in the range, at least we can say, broadly speaking, of another $30 million. That's part of the master plan that has not yet been finalized. And so when you add that up to the bottom line, you can see that we're starting to push some dollar limits here. And that's why I'm encouraging the school district to really look into some scenario planning to let us know, whether it's a half dozen or whatever their internal thinking is, some if-then situations. Just a minute, Charlie. Yeah, well, that pen is so annoying. Sorry. But that's why this report is so valuable, to let us see where we are in terms of spent, where we are in terms of the commitment, which is the contracts that are issued, those are obligations, we're on the hook for it, and then also our general budget planning, which is a planning number. Okay? But I just encourage you, take a look at this report. It's got some, I think, some usefulness. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Comments? Charles, and then Lorenz.
I just want to point out, you highlighted 3 schools and you brought up this thing, but you didn't really mention the critical thing that puts those schools there. They're all schools that were supposed to have been closed, and I think it's important for us when we discuss any kind of future obligations to point out that whether it's considered politically impossible to close schools unless you have a state trustee who's willing to veto anything, that this is a real cost that people are paying that has nothing to do with the operational budget, but is by adding these 3 schools into the bond program, by not closing these schools, it then turned them into items that have to appear on this thing that aren't really budgeted for. So all I'm saying is that just point out that these 3 schools are schools that should not be there.
Well, whether or not they were on the closure list at one time or not, is that what you're saying?
It was only one time, there was that plan.
When there's more schools.
And wasn't approved.
Yeah, the basis for the closure though, merits some discussion, which we're not gonna have time for.
No, right, yeah.
And so, again, you're studying an opinion that, again, how is that relevant to the figures that we currently have? And the reality as well, that there is indeed a need for those schools. If you visit those schools, you will see that they are 50, 60 years old, and if you want your kid to go to that, you know, fine,
Right.
but, come on.
But my
To
point was,
make a point that these schools, that we have additional costs because schools were supposed to close, we also have to consider the arguments for or against that.
Charlie, the important point is that the school district, the latest thinking, which this is reflected as of August 20th, was that those three schools are code 4, waiting to be rebuilt. So a judgment has been made, whether or not they were at some time on a closure list, a judgment has been made right now that they're on waiting to be rebuilt. And that the master plan has not been finalized to budget the 30 million-ish or so that it would take to do them yet. That was my point of bringing that up.
Okay.
A lot of
Do you
moving
have
parts on
any
this.
other questions before we move on?